Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. Welcome back to the show, Spencer.
Good to be here.
So 13 months of talk, midnight agreement. Canada and the U.S. have a trade deal. What's your take on it?
Well, it's interesting. There's been a lot of spin from the government about how it's a big win for Canada. But if you actually look objectively at the agreement, all that really happened was just bad things were avoided, and there were no real concessions from the U.S. to Canada. If you look at all the things Trudeau's trying to take credit for, which is the Chapter 19 dispute mechanism, not completely getting rid of supply management, not having auto tariffs, those are all things that already didn't exist or were part of the previous NAFTA agreement. So none of the changes moved in Canada's direction. By contrast, the states certainly got a lot of what they wanted, more access to the dairy market. There's a cap on Canadian auto exports, a cap that probably wouldn't be hit for a long time, but a cap nonetheless. And there's pharmaceutical changes to pharmaceutical drugs, so that's interesting. Probably going to have higher prices for pharmaceutical drugs in Canada. And really the U.S., I think, got more out of the agreement than anyone else did.
Well, Trump said for the longest time everybody else was ripping off the U.S. Were they?
To a certain extent. It's a kind of a tough issue because on the one hand, the U.S. as the world's, primary, currency, most countries use either use U.S. dollars or in most cases, of course, trade in U.S. dollars. So that always entails a chance that you're going to have a much higher deficit, a trade deficit, because you're producing currency or using that currency to buy products from the rest of the world. But he does make a good case, especially in terms of national security issues, where if you have a country that is a superpower, but so many essential products for the economy are made in other countries, and manufacturing jobs have left that country and gone to other countries, then that does make the country very vulnerable. So I think he is doing the right thing for his country by trying to bring manufacturing jobs back, by trying to balance trade. So to a certain extent, the U.S. was being ripped off. I don't think really by Canada, though, so that's interesting.
Well, we still have steel and aluminum tariffs. Are they going to disappear? Is there any guarantee of that?
No, strangely, that wasn't part of the deal, which I find quite odd. You'd think if you're negotiating all these things, Trudeau and Freeland at least could have gotten some movement on that, but that's been discussed. They're saying it's a totally separate issue. I don't think that's going to change until Canada gives very strong indications to the U.S. that there's going to be movement on making sure that China can't ship steel into Canada and then call it Canadian steel and then ship it into the U.S. So the government has already done some things on that, but it seems there's going to need to be more done before the U.S. takes those tariffs off.
They also didn't remove the buy U.S. clauses that a lot of U.S. municipalities and states have.
No, and again, that's, it's interesting. Andrew Scheer asked Justin Trudeau about that in question period, and Trudeau dodged repeatedly questions on actual specifics of the agreement, so he doesn't really seem to want to talk about what it actually entails, which really tells you something. And that's the point I made in a few articles I've written about it, is that the government is trying to say it's a big win, but avoiding disaster is not the same as winning anything. The movement was still in the direction of the U.S. on this one. And all the issues, like Trudeau wanted to talk about gender and Indigenous rights in the environment and all those things that people really realized from the start were not what the U.S. was going to want to talk about. Not too much mention of those things in the agreement, so, really their negotiation strategy did not work well.
Would Canada have been better off not to say we're going to be great amigos with Mexico at the start of the talks?
I think so. I mean, our trade with the U.S. is so much larger than our trade with Mexico. And at the beginning, the U.S. was focused, their anger was focused entirely on Mexico, not on Canada. So the idea that we would somehow, say, yeah, we are standing in solidarity with Mexico really made no sense. We should have gotten a deal with the U.S. quickly. I think we would have gotten a deal under much better terms when they were focused on Mexico rather than Canada. And it's funny, it's the job of countries to look after their own interest. I mean, Canada said, oh yeah, we stand in solidarity with Mexico. But when Mexico saw a chance to get a deal with the U.S. and when they saw that the anger of the U.S. seemed to be shifting towards Canada, Mexico didn't hesitate to get a deal for their country, and that's the right thing for them to do. You need to look after your own country. They did that, and really Trudeau didn't.
Brian Mulroney, who penned the original NAFTA deal, was pretty happy to see with what we got. Do you think he was looking on the positive side that it could have been a lot worse?
I think so. I think, he is part of the elite and part of the establishment. So, his thinking really, I think, lines up much more with Justin Trudeau than with even current conservatives now, really, which is unfortunate. But, he can do what he wants. But, I think his main concern was that, that's a legacy issue for him, NAFTA, and he didn't want to see it destroyed. So I think he's probably just expressing his feeling of relief that it wasn't totally dismantled. But, again, if you go into a negotiation and you don't really get anything, and then you just come out and you say, oh, well, we didn't get totally destroyed in the negotiation, so we won. That's not really true. You didn't win. If you avoid disaster, that's not winning.
Were BC and Quebec the big losers because they're the producers of steel and aluminum? Well, Hamilton is, but aluminum is big in Quebec and BC, and also dairy.
Yeah, the dairy issue, it's expanded access for the U.S. Supply management still exists. It's relatively similar to what was under the TPP, although slightly more access for the U.S. than they would have had under that one. And when it comes to steel, the issue there is that the tariffs are still on, so that really didn't even get addressed in the agreement, which again, pretty surprising to me. You're negotiating a huge trade deal and free trade deal, and you don't include steel tariffs, so I find that strange.
Was it a good move for Canada when the U.S. decided not to go with U.S. content in cars, but the amount of money you pay your labor?
Yeah, I think the U.S. and Mexico had really worked on that one. That was agreed to, I believe, when Canada was not part of the negotiation. That is good for Canada. It's good for the U.S. as well. If you look at I think it's 8 out of the last 9 new auto plants in North America have been built in Mexico because of how cheap the labor is there. And so again, that's the problem often with free trade, right? It sends jobs, manufacturing jobs, to the jurisdiction with the lowest labor standards, the lowest labor prices, which isn't good for, the middle class in Canada and the U.S. So that is positive. But again, it's interesting that the Liberals are trying to take credit for that when that was mostly negotiated between Mexico and the U.S.
Is there anything Canada can look at as a success in this?
I think the only success is that it's removed the fear for investors. The uncertainty, that's the one thing investors don't want. Even when they know it's not going to be a good situation, at least investors know what they're looking at. But when it's total uncertainty, that's when investment really gets crushed. So I think from the perspective of if people were holding off on investing in Canada specifically because of trade fears, then I think that will somewhat be reduced. So that's a positive from where we were, but it's still not really a win. It's just the avoidance of a disastrous situation.
The Canadian dollar got a nice little pop out of the agreement, but do you think that's going to last?
I don't think so. I think the underlying concerns are still there. I know there is a big LNG announcement being made today, so that is a big investment. But overall, the investment picture in Canada has not looked good. Businesses can't compete, especially with the U.S., because taxes and regulations are much lower in the U.S. Still massive uncertainty about, the energy sector, particularly oil, getting pipelines done. And, the carbon tax, lots of political and economic uncertainty there. The government keeps expanding regulations. I think it's their new pipeline bill is seen by many in the industry as basically making it impossible to get pipelines approved. And our competitive position with the U.S. continues to get worse. So I think there'll be, a few days of, hype and, spin about how great things are going. But I think once that dies down, people are going to realize that the investment situation in Canada is still not too good.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after the break.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Vatic Ventures Corp. is a potash exploration company focused on the Korat Basin in Thailand, the world's largest undeveloped potash resource. Vatic's management has extensive potash exploration and development experience in Thailand. Vatic will have marketing advantage compared to Western producers. Drill program commences this spring. Vatic trades on the TSX Venture, symbol VCV, and on Frankfurt, symbol V8V2. Visit our website, vaticventures.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, what's your take on the Quebec election?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's the latest in a loss for Liberal parties at the provincial level. I mean, it's not going too well, in the East. New Brunswick, I think they just elected, close election there, but it looks like the combination of two conservative parties in New Brunswick will lead to the Liberals being pushed out of power. In Quebec, obviously, the Liberals lost bad there, and we saw what happened in Ontario where the Liberals got crushed. So it's interesting. The Liberal brand seems to be really suffering at the provincial level.
Well, they also lost in BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, BC is somewhat of a different case because it's a combination of the Liberals and the Conservatives in the same party, still called the Liberals, but it's kind of an odd thing there. But, from both the left and the right, I think the Liberals are not doing too well. In Quebec, it's interesting because the Coalition Avenir Quebec is a more conservative-leaning party than the others. Former separatist is the leader, but he's renounced separatism since he's focused on the economy. They also focused a lot, which is interesting, on identity issues. They said people need to learn French within 3 years. Immigrants need to do better at getting jobs and integrating into the workforce. They wanted to have tougher measures on face coverings to protect, Quebec values and Western values. So I think that the media is obviously going to downplay that, but that's very interesting that things the media would claim are controversial or, politically incorrect actually seem pretty popular when people have a chance to vote for it.
Is that the same kind of thing we've seen in places like Italy?
I think so. I think it's, you even see it in Canada. There's a big gap between throughout and in the whole Western world between what the elites and the media think about, cultural issues, national values, and then what most people think. A good example is I think it was Bill 62 in Quebec, Bill 62, where they would talk about banning face coverings in public, mostly, of course, talking about the burqa and the niqab. The Liberals in Quebec brought in something to ban that, and the CAQ wanted even tougher measures, so we'll see what happens there. But it had massive support in Quebec. It had massive support majority support in every province in Canada. Two polls were done on provincial opinion of that and widespread support. And then all the political parties and the media, came out against it nationally. Even the Conservatives said they were against it. So there's a huge gap between what the people in power think and what most people think about those issues.
Didn't a recent poll find the majority of Canadians would rather see fewer immigrants than more?
Yeah, record high support for lower immigration levels, the most that's ever been seen. And that's not a surprise at all. I mean, Trudeau is increasing the numbers. Never asked Canadians. Increasing the numbers drastically over what they were under Harper, and already pretty high under Harper. I mean, as a percentage of the population, Canada already had some of the highest immigration levels under the Harper government. Trudeau, without even talking to Canadians about it, is massively increasing the numbers. And then the fact that the border's not being secured. Canadians expect people to play by the rules. We play by the rules. We expect everyone to do that. And now people are crossing illegally. The border's obviously not secure. And then people, when they cross illegally, they get a bunch of government benefits, and they get to jump ahead of those who are actually respecting the system. So I think that's undermining support for immigration as a whole.
Is it true only a handful of people who have been found to have crossed illegally have been actually deported?
Yeah, it's less than 1%.
1% of the tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Is that another frustration point for people that once they're found to have crossed illegally, they're not sent packing?
Well, I think that's a big problem, and the issue is that encourages more illegal border crossings because people, they look at what happens and they see, okay, well, if you cross into Canada legally, it looks like you have a 99% chance of getting to stay. So that's a big incentive for people. It's just even those who came to Canada legally from the U.S. because they were facing deportation in the U.S. So obviously something going on there. Even just 1% of those people have been deported. So it's the government's just really, they just don't have the toughness for it. They don't have the stomach for it. And Trudeau, I really don't think Trudeau believes in borders. He said Canada should be a post-national state. He's obviously a big-time globalist. So I really don't think he believes in borders. And if he doesn't believe in it, he's not going to enforce it.
Are provinces like Ontario right to ask for more aid to look after these people?
I think so. I mean, the problem is, as Rob Ford once said, there's only one taxpayer, right? So if, of course, it's one level of government, the federal government giving more money to provinces to deal with illegal border crossers, that helps the provincial government financially, but it's still coming from all the same people. The real solution is you have to create a disincentive. You have to send people, you have to deport them quickly. You have to make sure they don't get access to any government benefits. You can't have it be beneficial for people to cross illegally because unless that changes, people are going to keep doing it.
Well, you broke the law to get in, so right away you're a lawbreaker. Why would you want them as a citizen?
Exactly. And there was a recent case where two people who came illegally are now filing a human rights complaint because they are being denied, rightfully so, they're being denied government-sponsored childcare benefits in Quebec. And amazingly, they're filing a human rights complaint. And what's even worse is that there's groups in Canada who are helping them. I don't see how that's allowed, really. How are you allowed to be a Canadian group that helps people sue our own government when those people came illegally? To me, that makes no sense.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, Maxime Bernier's new party, the People's Party of Canada, is that a threat to splitting the Conservative vote come next election?
It could be. A lot remains to be seen. How many candidates they run, how much attention they get. He is getting in the media a lot, so it's going to be interesting. But one thing I think that could be interesting too is that, he's also going for a lot of non-voters. He's talked about that. And the other issue is that he's bringing up things that have not really been talked about. He's going to bring up ideas that I think a lot of Canadians agree with, but that most other political parties have been too afraid to discuss. And it's always possible that will make more Canadians realize that they're actually much more conservative than they think they are. So there's always a possibility that there will be just more Canadians overall who are conservative, and that could start to change the political landscape in Canada dramatically.
What issues do you think he's going to hammer?
Well, I think he's going to talk about identity, obviously. He's being fairly careful on how he discusses that. But if you look at all the polls, there's certainly a conversation to be had about integration, about what values we do and don't accept in Canada. I think he's going to be, more forcefully than anybody really talking about getting rid of corporate welfare, getting rid of cutting taxes dramatically, reducing the size of government. And there hasn't really been, the Conservatives have always been about tweaking things currently, moving it a little bit more in a conservative direction. But I think Bernier is going to be talking really about huge changes, and that's something a lot of people have not heard in the country for a long time.
Bernier is a very vocal free trade supporter as well.
Yeah.
Is that a plus?
Yeah.
Because Canadians understand free trade usually means lower prices at the store.
I think it'll be a plus on some issues. I think it's going to be a challenge on things like trading with China. You know, I'm pretty pro-free trade, but even I'm not a fan of the idea of a free trade deal with China. So I think he could run into some issues among conservatives there. But again, you know, it's whatever he's going to be talking about. I think he's going to be expanding the ideological debate in Canada, and that's something that's been, I think, very long overdue. I mean, if you look at especially the media in this country, it's all conducted within such a narrow range of opinion that it's really, there's not even real debates in this country, and I think that's going to change.
When I talked to Maxime, I asked him if he thought the Conservative and Liberal parties are essentially the same, and he said yes, and he's going to try to be different. How else can he differentiate himself from those two big mainstream parties?
Well, I think one thing is going to be attitude, really. I think especially pushing back against the establishment, pushing back against the media, which he's done, you know, more than others. I think if you look at the Canadian media, I think there's so much bias against conservatives and conservatism that people don't even notice it because it's so ingrained into the system. It's so widespread. And I think he's going to be challenging that and bringing attention to it. And I think that could bring a lot of change in the media, you know. I think one reason that, you know, things like your radio show does well, things like my website does well, is because there's a lot of people who realize that the media is not really, the mainstream media is not really balanced anymore. They're not really fair, and they're looking for their opinions to be represented. So I think he's going to be pushing back against that a lot, and I think that could bring some really important changes.
Andrew Scheer doesn't seem to really be out there all that much. Does he have to become more vocal and more public?
I think so. I think, you know, he's obviously a very smart person. But I think the challenge he has and the Conservatives have right now is that the media landscape has changed quite dramatically. Obviously, he talked about the bias, but there's also, they want controversy. And that means you have to be interesting. And so even though most of the media, I think, totally oppose Bernier's viewpoint, he gets attention. He's controversial. He gives them something, in many cases, the way CBC treated him, something to fight against, which isn't what the media is supposed to be doing, but it does mean he does get a lot of attention. Justin Trudeau obviously acts more like a celebrity than a politician, which obviously has serious problems in that he doesn't do a good job of his actual job, but he gets a lot of attention. And Andrew Scheer is extremely boring. Traditional politician, very boring. Doesn't mean he wouldn't be good at the job, but it does mean he has a tough time getting attention because the media doesn't see it. You know, they don't see opportunities for clicks and views. It's unfortunate, but that is the media environment we live in, and that's his real challenge. He's not that exciting.
Did Doug Ford do the right thing where he basically created his own media channel to get his message across? For example, TV reports that looked like they were from a real TV station, but were actually his in-house reporters.
Yeah, I think he did the right thing. You know, considering how biased the media is, I think as a conservative, you have to go around it. You know, it's similar, not exactly the same, but of course somewhat similar to what Trump did with his massive Twitter account. Trump has joked that having his Twitter account is like owning the New York Times without the losses, although the New York Times is profitable now, mostly because of all their Trump coverage. But, you know, if you're a conservative, you have to go around the media and get your message right out to the people. And social media, that's exactly what social media is for. And I think, you know, that's just a change in how democracy and the media functions. And I think it's for the better overall.
Spencer, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
My guest has been investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at spencerfernando.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Any questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.